Let's have a lesson and discussion on this work. Follow the lesson for free and just pick up all the tips. But if you're interested, I do have a sheet music edition of all 25 etudes in Carcassi's Op.60, and there's a link for that in the description. Etude number 10 for me is one of the most quintessential Carcassi etudes. He has pretty much one texture throughout the entire piece, and the pedagogical tasks here are very strict all the way through the etude, making it a great learning opportunity. It also combines a number of different things into one etude. So on the one hand, we have shapes that are usually in thirds, and on other intervals as well, sixths and whatnot. But nevertheless, we have fixed fingers, which makes sure that the students curving their fingers, it's a good exercise just in terms of alignment in that regard. But then the additional slur activity, the hammer-ons and pull-offs, creates like a fixed finger with a slur, which is a really great way to work your hand position and alignment, as well as your slurs, but also your finger independence, because you have two fixed fingers with one activated finger. So those things in combination just make it such a useful etude for students. And in terms of performance, it can be a really fun little piece too, because it has like a breath to it, but it also has lots of small movements and embellishment, which can be very exciting. It's almost like finger candy to play, and it can be kind of fun to listen to as well. So there's a ton of different ways that we could practice this because there's so many elements involved. But the good thing is that if we look at the first two measures, or at least the first four measures, that's pretty much the whole etude. Like, he keeps that same texture the entire way through, making it a very efficient etude in that regard. So one way to practice it, but also to musically conceptualize it, would be to just play those thirds, like the first beat of each measure. You know, when you think of the piece like that, that is the musical content, really. It's just like, and that's it. It's so simple, right? So that kind of represents the first 8 measures. Just that simple. But then there's a little bit of embellishment with slurs, and then just accompaniment chords. Like, that's all just chords. So I think the musical content is just in that A. We could even just put it into a single note for each of the 2 measures. So when you're conceptualizing the piece, I would practice doing that, is playing it in that super simple way, while also learning the chord shapes and making sure your hand is nicely aligned, because if you're playing this with bad hand alignment, you're going to find the slurs very difficult to add in later. So just really work on your hand, your alignment and your finger curvature, playing those thirds. And then when you add the slurs in, you could practice it first with just ascending slurs. Just to make sure that your ascending slurs, in guitar lingo that's hammer-ons, to make sure they're clean. I do that a lot when I'm warming up with this piece. I'll just play just the ascending slurs so I can just focus on those first. And then I'll practice it with just descending slurs. So I can just isolate it and make sure that I'm actually playing a clean ascending slur and a clean descending slur before putting them together, because I think the danger is when you put them together, they can get mushy and they can get muddy sounding. And I've played this etude for many years and taught it a lot. But when I actually pushed the record button and listened to myself, I did realize the first time that like, oh, you know, that's a little bit more muddy and messy than I thought they were. Because it's just easy to kind of just go, you know, just to blah it out. But if you really, like, how is my ascending slur? How is my descending slur? Are they both clean? Do they have a certain amount of crisp to them? And especially with the descending slur, like, am I doing a lift off? Or am I actually kind of plucking the string downward and getting some crispness out of that descending slur? So if you really work just the first two measures in that way, I think you have a model for the rest of them. Of course, another aspect of the piece is switching from one chord to the next smoothly. There's lots of shifts. There's usually a guide finger, but not always, even from measure 8 into measure 9. It's just a jump, so you do have to work on getting from point A to point B. But put all those things together and you have a great little etude, and then on top of that you have some crescendos and dynamics and also just pulling your way through the 8 measure phrases to make sure that you aren't getting caught up on each individual beat, but you're actually going through phrases long term. Because remember, that's our goal. In terms of articulation, a lot of people play this quite detached, and I will say that I used to do that as well. So, more like, a little bit of detachment. And that's good. That's fine. I didn't do that today, but that is one possible interpretation. And I think if you watch a lot of YouTube videos of pros playing the piece, you'll find that articulation a lot. It makes a certain amount of sense in the piece, both in terms of the way it was notated, but also just in terms of of all the shifting and everything like that. The musicality and that articulation work well together. I decided to really try to emphasize that simple thing. So I was really trying to go like here, here, and then everything else I tried to kind of soften up a little bit and smooth out, until it became more active later. So, lots of sustain on the first beat, and then just until here, you can increase those a little bit more because they're a little bit more active and they're not quite the same texture. So lots of different options to think about there, and I would encourage you to practice both and experiment with both. So I think we'll just do a walkthrough of the piece now, and I'll just talk about some of the things in the piece. But because it's such a uniform texture, there won't be too much to discuss. It's really about practicing more than anything. Through all those, you can first finger shift, the first finger guide fingers, you can keep it on the string. Same thing there, first finger just stays down. Measure 9, a little bit of a crescendo, cadence, and once you arrive at that chord, really just back off then, because the cadence is over. Measure 17. to discuss. There are options where you could play the thirds in different strings, things like that. I think this keeps pretty true to what Carcassi probably did. So you can explore those ideas. The only other thing I'll say is that in terms of the left-hand alignment, a lot of students are going to find, especially if you're not ready for the piece, and I hope that you are if you're playing it, but all these shapes where the fourth finger ends up on the accompaniment, you know, if your hand is like this, I can't even reach that. Like, it just doesn't work. You have to have your hand properly aligned so the fourth finger can just come straight down on that string, or any other string for that matter. But if I'm misaligned, I can't even reach that second string. So that tiny amount of alignment is so important. Again, one of the best Carcassi etudes in terms of its pedagogical value. I love assigning this piece once students have done some like scales and thirds and they've practiced some basic, slur exercises and whatnot. A logical next step would be to combine fixed fingers with the slurs, and this etude offers an opportunity to get away from like strict technical exercises and to put it into a musical context where you have to think about what kind of musical texture it is and what kind of feeling it is, how light you're playing, what kind of articulation you're using, crescendoing through certain phrases, and not getting hung up on the technique itself. So I love using the etude for that reason, and just really getting the student out of their technique exercise box and into using your technique for musicality, and that's what etudes are all about, and this one is particularly good for that.